One of the most valuable and absolutely crucial skills required to be a good chess player is knowing how to evaluate a given position properly. Now, I don't just mean looking at the board and thinking this move looks fun, or, oh, my opponent will find that move scary, because if you're playing one move at a time like that, you're gonna end up blundering your queen every other move, right? No, instead, we have to be able to talk to the board, ask it questions, because when we do that, the board will speak back to us. Now, that sounds a little bit strange, but I have a game played between two chess gods, or Grandmasters, as they're officially called, whatever, Topalov and Sasikiran, where we are going to look at a position, ask the board questions, and the board is going to speak back to us and tell us what to do. And we even have a couple of quotes that have actually come from Topalov himself in an interview with New in Chess in 2007, where we can actually get a glimpse into his thought process during the game. Let's hop into it. So here we have the board, right? And let's just kind of jump forward through the opening. We have, I believe this is the Nimzo Indian, but I could be, yeah, it's the Nimzo Indian. And, nothing too exciting in the opening, right? We have d5 here, both players just developing their pieces and striking in the center with their pawns. And then we have a3 kicking the bishop back to d6, okay? C takes, d5. We're going to open up the center real quick, and we're going to play b4, take some more queenside space, and, really clamp down on this c5 square. Now, I said we would jump forward. Let's go ahead and play a few moves here. We get a4, and we're coming up on the position I'd like to look at. a4, rook e6, knight e2, and a5. Okay. Now, I know we kind of flew through a lot of the game here, but the point is not to analyze, the entire game, but rather how to look at this position, evaluate it, and come up with a plan, right? Because, again, if you're playing one move at a time, then you're going to end up blundering and your moves aren't going to be very coherent. Whereas if you look at the position and think, okay, this is how the pieces are interacting, this is how the board is set up, how should I approach my thought process to this position, right? Because refining our thought process is a really, really powerful way to becoming better at the game of chess. So we look at this position. We ask certain questions. Okay, who has more space? And by that, I mean, who controls more squares on their opponent's half of the board? Well, if you ask that question, the answer is going to be white, right? Look at this. White has a lot more queenside space than black does anywhere else on the board. These A and B pawns are really clamping down on these light squares. And just look at all this open space here that white has. I mean, the black pawns take away these squares, that's okay. But look at all this space, whereas black is super cramped, right? Black is very, 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 very cramped here. These pawns, haven't moved. The king side hasn't, moved any of the pawns here, so we're not looking at space there, but we're looking here, right? White has more space. Great. That's a good thing for white. That's in white's favor. Now, we can ask other questions, like, what are the quality of the pieces? Well, we asked that. Okay, let's see. White's b2 bishop here is not doing too much. It's kind of staring at its own pawn and playing, just kind of a passive role at the moment. We look at black's b7 bishop, very similar story, a little bit more sad in this case, because this bishop is really just defending this d5 pawn, which cannot easily be defended by the c pawn because, well, we're going to take that and then have a very weak pawn on b6 and a hole on b5 for white to take advantage of. So the d5 pawn, getting to that, is now actually pretty weak. And so is the c7 pawn, right? This dark squared bishop here is really, really important in defending the c7 pawn because the queen doesn't want to stay tied down to that. And notice how I'm asking all of these questions and looking at all of these things just in one given position, right? Now, if you're playing bullet chess or blitz chess, you might not have the chance to really evaluate like this. But if you're playing a longer format game, 10, 15 minutes, maybe a classical game if you're entering in a tournament or something, those are, you have the time to start asking these questions. So let's delve in a bit deeper. What is black trying to do? We're imagining this from white's perspective here, right? what is black trying to do? Why am I asking myself that? I'm playing with white. Shouldn't I know what I want to do? Well, before I can really answer that, I kind of have to know what my opponent's trying to do, so I can try and dodge that and then come in with my own punch. That was like the weakest punch I think anyone has ever seen, but that's okay. It was my left hand, all right? I'm a righty, and that was my left hand, so we'll blame it on that. But getting back to the game here, what is black's plan? Well, it's not super clear, but I have a feeling since black played rook e6 that he wants to start some kind of kingside attack if he can, right? Both of the bishops are staring towards the king side. Of course, the b7 bishop is kind of staring at the pawn. The knight here on e5 is staring here, right? This black knight here probably wants to jump in and start putting some pressure. The queen can get over here. Maybe the f-pawn if black is feeling spicy. The rooks could double, right? The rook is going to lift, and just looking at where the pieces are pointing, you see, look at this. Look at this. How much is going on the king side? Okay. Now what is one of the best pieces that black has? And I'm getting to a point here. Trust me, I'm not trying to bore you to death. I'm trying to teach you something, right? So what is black's kind of best piece at the moment? If you set the bishop on b7, then I think you need to go take a nap and come back a little bit refreshed, because that's black's absolute worst piece at the moment. The best piece would be this bishop on d6. Why is that? Well, it's staring directly at this h7 pawn, which teamed with the queen and maybe the rook and maybe the knight in the future. We could have a lot of pressure put onto that h2 pawn. So how can we get rid of this bishop while also maybe getting rid of one of our own subpar pieces? Well, when you ask that question, you may come up with the idea of bishop a3. Bishop a3 aims to trade off our worst piece right now, which is this b2 bishop, and that's what Topalov played. My cat is joining us for this moment. Say hi, Jasper. Hi, buddy. Okay. He said hi. Well, our worst piece, right, bishop going to a3 to trade off for black's best piece. It only makes sense, right? We're going to take away our opponent's most valuable asset and give it, a piece of coal in return, right? So let's see how this unfolds after this. And you see that when you ask yourself these questions, okay, white has more space over on the queen side. Black has a weak c7 pawn. Maybe we can attack that in the future with a rook. Maybe a queen. Maybe the knight is going to come in and attack the weak d5 pawn with the queen and all of that, right? And black is trying to get us over here on the king side. So let's mitigate that. Let's calm that down and trade off the dark squared bishop. Well, look at that. Now look at what we've done. We've caused two doubled pawns here to be quite weak in the center of the board. Sure, they take away the e5 square from our knight. Who cares, right? We're going to attack the weaknesses all throughout black's camp here. So, rook c1 aiming to contest the only open file on the board, the c file. That's just only natural, right? Rooks love open files. Knight f6 here, or knight d to f6, and we have h3. Now, after h3, I have our first quote from Topalov, and he said in this interview, as you can see, all this is not about concrete lines, but about clear positional weaknesses. I knew that it didn't matter how long it would take me, but in the end, all the rooks would be exchanged, further highlighting his structural problems. Now, what does that mean? Well, imagine fewer pieces on the board. Imagine the rooks are gone, right? Might take him a long time, as he said, but imagine they're gone. Well, now we've got all these weaknesses throughout the board that white is going to be able to attack. We have a light squared bishop that can attack this, a queen that can also attack that pawn on d5, and the knight, as I stated before, right? And he said it's not about concrete lines right now. I mean, you don't have to calculate moves 10, 15 moves deep into this position to know what the ideas are, what the board is telling you to do, right? You just take the position into account and try to figure out how can I maneuver my pieces in a way to do what I want to do. And we've been talking about what we want to do, right? So I won't repeat myself in that respect. But let's see. We have rook going back to e7 and queen b3. There it is, immediately starting to eye that d5 pawn and put on some pressure. Rising the heat, if you will. Imagine like a hot plate, right, in science class, and you're trying to like figure out the boiling temperature of water. Spoiler alert, it's 100 degrees Celsius or 212 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm pretty sure that's the right number. And you're slowly turning up the heat, slowly but surely. We trade the rooks on the c-file and immediately claiming the c-file once again with the rook. You can't take that. You can't take that. There's a knight. Just in case you were thinking that. Hate to burst your bubble. We have instead the rook going to c7, and we trade it. And just like he predicted, all the rooks would fall off the board. And now there's less pieces that black has that can defend his weaknesses, right? With the two rooks, they could have come over and helped defend this pawn here. But without them, it's just this knight, which is going to get kicked away pretty soon. And the queen defending, right? This light squared bishop can't defend these pawns at all, right? It's colorblind when it comes to the dark squares. Now, we have queen c2 trying to trade the queens. And I have another quote for you from Topalov. And he said in this position, or he said about this position, after the exchange of queens, I can chase away the knight on e4, transfer my bishop to b3, and sooner or later I will exert pressure with two pieces on d5 and push my kingside pawns. So he wants to trade the queens, kick away the knight at some point on e4 with a move like f3, and then get a knight over to maybe f4 and the bishop to b3 to attack the d5 pawn. Right? That's his plan here. That's his idea. Now, we have queen e7. Queen goes back to c1 and knight h2. Kind of some maneuvering here, right? To see what he wants. Now, here we have... hold on. I'm looking at the moves here. Okay, h4, right? Just gaining some kingside space. And this is threatening to win the game with f3. Because if black does nothing, well, the game is over. The knight is trapped. The knight is absolutely trapped here. All of the squares have been taken away. The d6 pawn really, man, trapping its own knight. How sad is that? Now that didn't happen, right? These are Grandmasters we're talking about. Instead, we have knight back to e8, f3 kicking the knight back to f6, and black is trying to cocoon here into some sort of defensive stance. But white is just going to keep on coming. White jumps the knight into f4, just like we talked about, right? And now it's not just about the pawns in the center. Now we're starting to brew up some kingside attack, right? You start asking yourself as white, okay, so I kick away the knight. Now I'm starting to expand on the king side. And where are my pieces pointing? Towards the king side, right? Pieces are pointing towards the king side. The knights are jumping in. The queen can swing over and point at the king, right? So it's killing feeding two birds with one scone, if you will. We're attacking or putting pressure on the central pawn, and we're putting pressure on the king side pawns. Now we have queen to e1 to g3, looking for this. Well, really looking for this, right? To take with check, and you can't take because you're pinned. Now the king goes to h6, but guess what? Topalov doesn't care. Topalov does not care. Black is low on the clock at this point. Now the best move here is like king f2, and then, king f2, knight g7, and like, playing it very, very calm, very easy. But instead, knight takes h5, sacrificing the knight to open up the king and start an attack. Now, the engine says it's a draw. The engine says, but you have to play perfectly. Now imagine being in time trouble in this position with the bishop, the queen, and the knight, and all the pawns, and your pawns suck. This bishop ain't getting into the game. And what are your knights doing? Stumbling on the back rank. Imagine playing that. And also, Black doesn't know that it's equal. Black doesn't have an engine in front of him telling him it's zeros, right? He's trying to find the defensive moves, and he does for some time. He finds the only move here, f5. Only move here, knight g7. And then only move here, knight g6. Only moves to keep the position in balance. Now, another crazy move here played by white. It's the only move to keep, it equal. The rest of the moves are better for black. We have knight takes h5, which is really, really cool move. You can't take with the knight because you are pinned. You can't take with the king because this is checkmate. You weren't expecting that one now, were you? This is checkmate. Can't take this because the queen defends it through the king, right? And then all of the squares are just taken away by the pawns. This is insane. So knight takes h5. Queen takes e3. Again, keeping the balance. The only move here. King to h2. Now here, black messed up. Yeah, here black messed up. Should have taken on d4, defending the knight, and winning some more material, getting some passed pawns going on. But instead, queen to e7, which allows this knight f4 check, g4, and the pawns are just rolling. White has too much space after the queen trade and the knight trade. Sure, you're down a bishop, but you have a ton of pawns to save for it, and there's just no way. You sacrifice the one pawn over here to kick the king back, and you're just pushing the pawns. And black resigns. Black resigns because there's just no way to stop this pawn. And even if you could, white is just going to go ahead and gobble these up. And you also can't do this because you lose the pawn race, which is quite sad. And you're just going to get checkmated. So black resigned. If you made it to the end of this video, just want to say thank you. I hope you learned something. I hope you found it entertaining, educational. I hope you got some kind of value out of it. Make sure you like and subscribe this video. Really appreciate it. And check out one of these other videos floating around up here somewhere. Have a great day, guys.